I'm Nick. Today we're going to be installing some extended wheel studs on the Veloster N. These wheel studs are made by ARP. They're made in USA and they're available at just about all of the Hyundai performance parts dealers. Let's start with the front. Of course, the first thing you need to do is remove the wheel, and then we have to take the caliper and rotor off. To remove the caliper, we need to remove this 19mm bolt as well as this one. With those two bolts removed, the caliper can slide off of the disc. And now we need to string it up with some wire. Okay, with the caliper out of the way, we need to remove the disc. To do that, there's two screws that need to come out, and I'm going to use an impact screwdriver just to get those started. Now with the disc off, we can see the hub and how the studs are pressed into the hub from the back. In order to remove the original length studs, we need to take a lug nut that we don't care too much about because we're going to be smacking it with a hammer. Thread it onto there so that there's still about 1/4 inch on the back there, and just smack it with a hammer. Now, as you can see, we can't remove it yet because it hits the heat shield of the brake. So you're going to need to put the car in neutral so that we can rotate the hub so that the stud is all the way forward. And where the caliper attaches to the suspension upright is the only place that we'll be able to remove the stud. So go ahead and remove all of the studs by rotating it around, knocking it out, and then rotating to the next one. Now with all of the original studs removed, it's time to install the extended studs. Now these studs will just barely fit in this space, so you need to insert it like that and then sort of thread it on to get it past the point where the head of the stud gets past this lip on the casting. Once it's past that point, it'll go all the way. I put the car back in gear just so that the hub doesn't rotate anymore. It's going to make your life easier moving forward. I'm going to put a little bit of grease on the splines on the back of each stud, and also on the beginning of the threads of the stud. Now that the splines and the beginning of the threads are greased, I'm going to use two large nuts as spacers. These are larger than the thread of the stud, so they'll just slip over the stud, just like that. And I'm going to use another, this time an open-ended lug nut that I also don't care about. Thread that on there. Now with the car in gear, we should be able to rotate this and pull the stud onto the hub without the hub actually rotating. This lug nut requires a 21mm socket, but Yours might vary. Now you don't need to make this super tight, you just want to go until you feel resistance, and that's when the head is actually touching the hub. So right about there. And then I'm going to back the nut off. And that's one installed stud. Now you need to do the same thing for all the rest of the studs. Now that we have all 5 extended studs installed into the hub, it's time to put the brake disc back on. And finally, the caliper. ARP recommends that you torque the lug nuts to 85 to 90 foot-pounds. Let's move on to the rear wheel now. This one's going to be a little bit trickier than the front because we have to deal with the cable operated handbrake, and also the dust shield gets in the way a little bit. Alright, we first need to remove the caliper, and we can do that with a 14mm box end wrench. Okay, with both caliper bolts removed, we may or may not be able to slip the caliper back off of the disc. The problem is the tension on the handbrake cable. Even with the handbrake released, it doesn't give you a whole lot of space to pull the caliper off of the disc. Now with the caliper off, we can remove the disc. If you look over here, this little bit of dust shield is what gets in the way of us pushing the new longer studs in from the back of the hub. So what we need to do is bend this little bit of dust shield down against the hub. That should do it. Now, since we cannot lock the hub, it's going to be a little bit tricky when we try to tighten the stack of nuts and the lug nut to press the new stud in. So we need to work one by one and use the remaining studs to sort of lever it and keep it from spinning. So first I'm just going to remove one stud just like we did before with a hammer on a lug nut that you don't really care too much about. Now we need to get the new extended lug stud into the back of the hub, just like before. And so we need to sort of work it into the hole. And now this, the head, the lip on the head of the stud is gonna wanna get stuck on the dust shield, but if you rotate it and just sort of thread it through, it'll get past. Now we need to put together our stack up again. In order to prevent the hub from spinning, when we use the breaker bar on here to pull the stud through the hub, I'm going to use a 12mm wrench and the handle from the jack just to sort of leverage it against these two studs. Okay, now with all of the extended lug studs installed, we can put the brake disc back on. And now it's time to fight with the brake caliper again. And now finally we need to put the two caliper bolts back in. Remember to torque your lug nuts to 85 to 90 foot-pounds.